Okay. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Help with Natalie Cuomo. I'm so excited for this fabulous guest we have here today, Kim Anami, sex guru. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you? Thanks for
I'm
having me.
good. I am so happy. I'm so happy that you've joined us today. I how I found you was I had posted a video about Kegels and vaginal strength, and everyone was tagging you. And I was like, oh my God. So I just went on this deep like internet dive of all of your work, and I was so impressed. You're a sex therapist, vaginal weightlifter, sex guru. Can you tell me a little bit of like a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I call myself a holistic sex and relationship expert and a vaginal weightlifter. So it sounds like you came to me via my vagina, which many people do. And so my whole thing is basically helping people to up level their intimacy. And like people often would ask me, "Oh, so you help couples who are in trouble?" And I'm like, "Well, sort of, but I'm also really showing people how they can up level things, right? Like I believe that all women can have vaginal orgasms, G-spot orgasms, cervical orgasms. Every woman can shoot ejaculate across the room. Every woman can shoot ping pong balls with her vagina. Every woman has a high libido. Every man can have sex for hours at a time. Every man can learn how to have multiple orgasms. Every man can learn to separate orgasm from ejaculation. This isn't just the domain of some select few people. I guarantee that every single person can do these things. And so that's my goal really in my work, is to show people what's really possible in their sex lives. And a lot of the myths and misinformation that's out there, like for example with Kegels, right? Like the notion that doing a Kegel is just flapping your vagina at random in the wind, when the actual original Kegel exercise was designed with a weight placed inside the vagina. Because just like if you go to the gym and you were just to airlift with your bicep, nothing would really happen. You have to use weight for feedback and resistance. The same thing is with the vagina. And when Dr. Kegel created these exercises, he was treating women primarily for urinary incontinence, and he had a 90% success rate using this device inside the vagina. And then other doctors over the years modified the exercise without anything in the vagina, and it immediately tanked 50%, and it's been tanking ever since, right? Because in America, up to 60% of women have issues of urinary incontinence. 50% of women after childbirth, their internal organs fall out. It's something called pelvic organ prolapse. And this is according to the Yale University School of Medicine. So it's dismal out there. And that's because I think OBGYNs are too terrified to tell women to put something in their vaginas, right? So like, oh, just flap it like this, like air guitar or something, vaginal air guitar. And so that's where I come in, and went on this massive campaign of lifting weight with my vagina all over the world, right? So I'm known for lifting Murano glass chandeliers in Italy, green coconuts in Bali. I lifted a piece of the Berlin Wall at the Berlin Wall in Germany. That was amazing. That's one of my favorites, the Great Wall of Vagina. And, showing people like these are all of the amazing things that everyone can do, despite some of the myths and mythology and taboo and shame and fear that's surrounding this topic. So I have a lot of fun busting all that stuff.
I feel so lucky to be in a position to ask you questions right now. That is so awesome. Okay, how do you decide, first of all, what you want to lift?
Well, it started like I kind of had this notion that we would lift things that were indigenous to various regions. So when I did this LA series, I lifted a surfboard, some like organic cold pressed juice, some gluten-free sugar, coconut sugar sweetened organic donuts, crystals. And then in Bali, it was lots of tropical fruit. We went to Italy and did a lot of like Murano glass objects. We were in Venice for a while, and I
Pizza.
just like other, yeah, yeah, pasta, some truffle oil, some olive oil, like things that were indigenous to the area. And that's really how the themes have gone over time.
So okay, how is building your vaginal muscles similar to building muscles in other parts of your body. Like I imagine it takes a lot of time to build up that capacity. And like, so is it true that, and like, what are other things other than maybe, are there other things other than Kegels that build vaginal strength?
Well, the original Kegel builds strength, but not the one that most people think of as a Kegel, right?
Right.
Like when they say just, driving in the car, like clench your vagina, that's doing nothing. That's actually useless. And to actually prevent and reverse urinary incontinence for women to feel more in their vaginas, that can happen within a week. Like I had a woman who had urinary incontinence issues for like 20 years. She would need to wear a pad to go jogging. She was terrified to get on the trampoline with her kids. And then she got divorced and she was like out on the market again. And she's like, I'm going to get my vagina in shape for my new man. So she was doing the jade egg practice every day. And within a week, she'd stopped this incontinence that she'd had for 20 years.
Wow.
And so there's other sort of, devices out there to basically this idea that you're squeezing on, but I don't know how many of them actually increase weight, like just like a weight training practice, right? If you plateau and you don't need, like, to my level of like lifting coffee tables, you don't need to be at that level to feel the benefits. Like I said, even doing it 3 times a week for 10 minutes at a time will get you where you want to be. And I used to hold retreats, and on the retreats, I do a vaginal weightlifting class for the women. And so, they'll have their jade egg practice in the morning, and then in the afternoon, everybody has home play that they have to go do in their villas. And so they would go and have their sex dates with their partners, and the partner would be like, what did you do to your vagina? Like they could already feel
Really?
a difference within one session. That's just testament, though, to how numb women really are, right? Like women think of their vaginas as being these kind of passive things, like you can touch it, and move around in it, versus like this flute playing hand that can squeeze and articulate and pull and push. And women ought to be able to, with their vaginal muscles, make a man ejaculate or stop him from ejaculating with a load, like their vaginal hand job, right? Versus most vaginas, which women are quite numb and dissociated from. And a lot of women, they have, I think that their low libido issue is because they can't feel anything in their vagina. Why would you want to have sex if you can't feel anything? And most women are in that position.
So I guess I have two questions. One, why do you think a lot of women are experiencing that numbness? And two, just for the people listening, I don't know if everyone knows what a jade practice is or a jade egg is. So can you
Yeah,
explain that?
sure. I think the numbness is kind of a whole cultural worldwide collective of internalized oppression and suppression and shame and taboo around sexuality that women and men as well, like, internalize stuff, right? Instead of dealing with it and expressing it and healing it, people just suppress it. And then they end up with all kinds of ailments, right? They get growths on their reproductive organs, they get STDs, they get low libido, or they get really difficult periods, or men get, erection issues or premature ejaculation issues. And I would say that all of those things are symptomatic of stuck sexual energy. Like, I believe that's an energetic cause and not just a random physical thing that happens to people. So the jade egg practice is a 5,000-year-old practice that came out of ancient Taoist China. And this is around the time when they were creating their systems of acupressure and herbal medicine, acupuncture, and they would use sex as medicine. So you go to see your Taoist Chinese doctor of the day, they do a tongue reading and a pulse diagnosis, and they would say, okay, you've got deficient kidney energy. I want you to go home and have sex in reverse cowgirl position for the next 30 days, 3 times a day, because that position with the woman, bent over the guy, the sexual energy naturally just flows up into her kidneys and it nourishes them.
Uh,
So they looked at sexual energy as being healing, rejuvenative, life-giving, transformative energy. Like, if you're not creating new babies with it, you can heal yourself. You can create and use this energy in your day-to-day life, and especially in your own body. And so the jade egg practice was part of a series of exercises that women did to strengthen their genitalia, and men did this practice as well, not with a jade egg, but through like practicing penile weightlifting. And so it's a piece of stone, a piece of jade carved into the shape of an egg. There's a hole drilled through it. You put some string through the hole, it comes out the other side. The egg goes up into the vagina, and then you attach weight to the other end of the string. And so you start really slowly and gradually, and you work your way up. And you find that, like, very quickly, you've strengthened your pelvic floor, which supports all of your internal organs. And then you start to get more feeling in the vagina. Sensation comes back, libido comes back, lubrication comes back. Circulation equals lubrication. A lot of the time, people are not well lubricated because there's poor circulation in the vaginal tissues. So you strengthen them, you're moving them consciously all the time, and you're regenerating and allowing all of that stuff to flow. Hormones and neurotransmitters in those tissues, and other, like, moisture.
So, as someone that deals with relationships, sex, men, women, everyone, do you find that the stereotype is true that women feel more emotionally towards sex and feel more emotionally connected to orgasms, or do you feel that it's true for everyone, or that it varies person to person?
I think that's been the cultural conditioning. The cultural conditioning is that women are more emotional and almost need to be coerced into sex, right? Like, oh, I don't really, oh, you can, like, you have to seduce them into it. And men are taught that they're less emotional and more sexual. I don't really think that that is our true natures. I think that we're equally emotional and sexual, but that's, both of those things are very, like, a lot of our conditioning. And one of the arguments that would lead you to believe that women are just as sexual as men is that, do you know what 99.9% of male sperm do? What is their purpose?
To die?
um Sort of, but they do something before they do that.
I don't know.
It's to kill other sperm. 99.9% of sperm are kamikaze, looking for other sperm to kill so that they've got dominance. Like, they're accustomed to a survival of the fittest environment. So
Right.
I'm not using that as an argument for women to go and have sex with, like, a lot of random people. Like, I think perhaps in our evolutionary history that was more the case, right? And then the survival of the fittest sperm would duke it out within the vagina or the womb. But it's just to say, like, I think that women are highly libidinous and salacious creatures. They're just not allowed to be, right? One of the biggest taboos and biggest archetypal imprints that we get is Madonna whore, right? Like, there's a slut and there's a virgin. Like, women, you kind of very quickly learn as a woman growing up that you're like one or the other. Having a healthy, normal, powerful sex drive and enjoying sex isn't really in the equation. You're a slut or you're a virgin, like, you're a good girl or you're a bad girl. And so I really try to gear women to find occupying that middle space of, you can be virtuous and have integrity in your own way, but you can be wildly passionate about sex and prioritize it, as a daily part of your life.
Do you think that how do you think that sex, like, do you feel like it unlocks trauma that you store in the body, and why does it do that, if you think that?
Um, yeah, that's a really good question. I think that, so many people, like, the stats on sexual assault, as adults, and sexual abuse as children are so horrifically high that I'd say that most people have experienced some degree of sexual trauma. And for most people, because they're not consciously healing that, it's going to come out in some kind of untoward way. So I'll give you an example of that. Like, for years, I would see women, and I would see a pattern where a woman would have what they like, Western medicine is quite hopeless around a lot of this stuff, right? They'll just call it, like, tight vagina syndrome, like vagina on lockdown, right? But they don't tell you why, where it comes from, or they have no idea how to heal it. It's just, oh, you've got tight vagina syndrome. Like, oh, okay, well, I knew that. Thanks so much, fucking useless motherfucker. So, like, so women would then, it'd be like, okay, well, they often had history of sexual abuse. So, well, almost, I would say all of them did, where they hadn't resolved that, and their vagina is saying, don't come in, right? I'm not ready. I don't feel safe. Don't come in. And then they would do some healing around their trauma and process that. And then boom, problem solved. One woman had come to me and she'd come from India and she'd been in an arranged marriage for 15 years. And for 15 years, she would tell you that she didn't like sex, that it hurt, that she had this tight vagina syndrome. And one day she had the courage, which is amazing because a lot of people don't do these things in whatever kind of marriage they're in, they just stick it out. She laughed and she found this new lover. And she's like, oh my God, it's amazing. I never knew sex could be like this. Like her vagina, all of a sudden, like magic, her, vagina problems gone, and she is having incredible sex and orgasms all left, right, and center, right? And so we don't put that together. Maybe eventually we do, but that it's sourced from, yeah, some level of trauma, and that we're trying to force our bodies to do things that we think they should do and they don't. And a guy example of that, which isn't necessarily connected to trauma, but this idea of overriding and cultural conditioning. This guy friend of mine years ago, he came out of this long-term relationship. He's like, oh, I'm so excited to go and have sex with all these different women. So he had like 4 or 5 different partners at the time. And he came to me and he's like, oh, Kim, I've got this problem. Like I'm experiencing ED, like erectile issues. And I've never had this before. And he said, with like the 4 women, I keep having this problem, but with the one I really like, I don't have it. And I can't figure out what's going on. I'm like, are you really saying this to me right now? Like you're denying the fact that you think that you ought to be able to go out there and just bang all these chicks, but your cock and your body actually don't think that, right? Your deeper truth is that that isn't who you are and what you think, but you believe like there's been conditioning that this is like, you're like, all right, dude, go nuts. But his body is saying, no, like I'm connected to this particular person and that's who we're showing up for, right? So there's so much disconnect mentally, emotionally between the body and the sexual organs that's my primary work is reuniting these so people actually listen to their bodies and aren't just trying to override and dominate them.
What are some of the ways that like you work to reunite those?
Yeah, I mean, look, for women, the jade egg is a fantastic tool because you're physically strengthening and reawakening those tissues. And then the way I teach it is also more energetic and emotional. Like I work with a lot of guided visualization and techniques to help people process those things as they come up. Because yeah, as you like, women will have work with their jade egg and they might just start to cry, right? If we believe that the body holds trauma and stores trauma, the vagina stores an immense amount of it. And so they'll release something. Maybe they won't even know what it is, but there'll be some kind of emotional or energetic release. And that's fantastic. For men, I'd say like one of the big tools that I recommend is giving up porn. Is like because porn automatically is dissociating you, right? And from your body and from reality and putting you into this virtual kind of imaginary land, not to mention all of the detrimental things that happen with dopamine production and testosterone production and erections. Like it's dismal, right? It's really awful. It's not a moral judgment, but it's just to say like I don't think that's serving people in the long term. And so to come back and have a conscious self-pleasuring practice, right? Like to actually self-pleasure without all this external stimulation and to breathe and get into their bodies and get to know their bodies. And then to practice, I see that, like premature, like 75% of men come within 3 minutes of intercourse. Like we have like the epidemic we really have is premature ejaculation, right? Like men are having like, women are underfucked because men are only fucking them for 3 minutes, right? And so like you have what I call the underfucked woman, which is like this naggy, bitchy, frustrated woman. Yeah, because if a guy was fucking me for 3 minutes, that's exactly how I would be feeling as well. So I work with guys to build their stamina to go longer. And I'd even say that 3-minute ejaculation is also symptomatic of some kind of trauma, right? Because it's saying, I don't want to be here. I want to bail really fast. I'm afraid of deeper intimacy.
That's interesting. What are some of the tips that you teach guys to last longer?
Breathing.
Mm.
Breathing, breathe, motherfucker, breathe, like Wim Hof says. It's like most guys and most women, but it's particularly pronounced in men as they're approaching orgasm, they tend to hold the breath, breathe really shallow, right? And then they're gone and they pass out and it's game over, right? And the woman's sitting there like, oh, like I barely even got started, you know? And that builds resentment. So it's practicing breathing. It's like once you're on that train, like I say, if you look at 0 non-arousal, 10 is orgasm. If you build yourself up to about a 7, get to your edge. So your orgasm is in the distance, but not yet in danger of going over the edge. Then you pause, take 3 big, steady, deep breaths in and out. And you can keep building. And then, you know, when you get to that edge again, pause and breathe in and out. They call it edging, essentially, but it's like a tantric practice of, and then the more that you do that, you get comfortable hanging out in that edge zone, right? And then as you're breathing, you're moving and recirculating your sexual energy throughout your body. And so instead of after, whether you ejaculate or not, you're more likely to be energized, right? Like most guys pass out after they have sex because they've literally depleted, they've ejected all of this high quality, potent energy out of their system. But if you're breathing it, you're actually recirculating it back in the body. And so you can have sex, have an orgasm, and then when you're done, you'll feel like going for a run. You'll feel like going to the gym because you didn't release and just get rid of all of this energy. You've kept it for yourself.
Hi, everyone. This video is brought to you by Manscaped, and I am so excited to show you this new product, the Beard Hedger. The Beard Hedger is amazing. It will allow 20 different lengths with one attachment. The Beard Hedger is awesome because it can cut through very thick hair, which is important because some people have very thick hair. The Beard Hedger is also great because it's for beard pros and also for people who are just starting out with their beards. Let's take a look. All right. If you're happy and you want to get the Beard Hedger or any of Manscaped's amazing products, use the code NatalieC at manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping. So it comes in this beautiful case. Wow, it smells clean and fresh and new. And this is it. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's got all of these settings. There's going to be no nicks. It's completely safe. And listen, look how well it worked on me. So head on over to manscaped.com. All right. Use the code NatalieC for 20% off. Let's get back to the show. So I saw something where you talked about having a 1-hour orgasm. Is that kind of the same edging, or is that the actual orgasm? You're actively orgasming for that long?
Both. Like in women, the deeper vaginal orgasms that I'm a really big proponent of, like G-spot orgasms and cervical orgasms, by their nature, they're more full body orgasms and they last longer. So those sensations, yes, you're at an edge, but you're not necessarily trying so hard to live at that edge the way I think men have to put in more effort to be there. Once you're in that territory of these much more deeper, profound orgasms, you naturally just expand. Like I said, they become full body orgasms and more like multidimensional, emotional, spiritual, energetic cleanses of the whole system.
Do you think that, okay, so first, are like men and women having equally as deep orgasms, number one, and number two, like what are the different types of orgasms? Can you explain them and like break that down briefly?
Yeah, I'd say that for a guy who's having like a bust one out kind of typical penile orgasm is the lowest level of orgasm that you could have. And again, not sort of moral judgment. I'm using this as an energetic assessment. Like, where do you get the most pleasure and the most power and energy? And for a woman, it would be a clitoral orgasm, which is basically like you're just like busting one out as fast as you can to get that kind of quick high, right? Which is like a high, you build, you build, you build, you get a high, get to a peak, you have these contractions, and then you're depleted afterward. And usually women with clitoral orgasms will feel similarly. Sometimes they don't, and sometimes men don't feel exhausted after, but the majority do. And then for men, the best way to expand that orgasm is through breathing. right,
Mm.
where they could like hang out for an edge at, for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours at that edge, and then choose to ejaculate or not. They could get to the place of learning to orgasm without ejaculation. When they do that breathing practice, they can have more full body orgasms. They can have prostate stimulation orgasms. So the male G spot in the rectum, you can act just like the female G spot, like this turbocharger intensity builder for men. For women, they can have clitoral orgasms, G-spot orgasms, squirting, ejaculatory orgasms, cervical orgasms, anal orgasms, nipple gasms, full body orgasms, energy orgasms, which are like both men and women can have these, which are orgasms without touch. So I think I've covered most of them.
What are like how would you achieve an energy orgasm?
So years ago, I had an experience where I'd learned, like I was reading about Tantra, and they said, sexual energy is powerful, tangible energy. And if you want to try something, when you're with your lover, visualize that you're shooting energy into different parts of their body and see how they respond. So I tried this, and my lover would make, like, he would moan. I would do this, and he would have a reaction every time. And I was like, whoa, there's really something to this. So I think the more you get in tune with your body, like if you're somebody who meditates or does martial arts or yoga, you probably already have more, or breath work, more internal awareness of what's happening in your body. And so like the idea that thoughts are things, even like Einstein's, is it the spooky action at a distance, this theory of entanglement, which, are you familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
He talks about how one molecule has the capacity to affect another molecule, even if they're on different sides of the universe. Like your thought power is a tangible thing that travels and has an impact. So if you're really connected to someone, especially, and your heart's open, your vagina, your genitals are open, and you're moving, pushing energy towards them, they can feel that. So you could actually have orgasms without physical touch, without directly stimulating your genitals or even parts of your body. You can tune in and feel that and allow it to move through your body and create an orgasm.
It what you're saying reminds me of something that you posted that I really loved. You said that I don't want to butcher the specific quote. It is because it's a quote of yours, but something about like if you're having really connected sex, like that becomes a foundation for monogamy in a way. Like you don't like it becomes impossible to cheat if you're that sexually
Right.
connected. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So I coined the term conscious monogamy because, there's a lot of talk and a lot of positive energy around the idea of polyamory. And so I get asked about this all the time, especially in the last, I don't know, few years. And my response to that is that when a couple is really close and deeply connected, I would say that 99%, 99.9% of people aren't monogamous. They say they are, and they might think they are, but they're not really. Like, they're not really showing up and opening themselves emotionally. They're not really showing up and opening themselves up sexually. So when people make the argument, oh, monogamy doesn't work, you're actually saying that shitty relationships don't work, because most people have shitty relationships. If you really have a couple who's truly open and surrendered emotionally and sexually, and raw and vulnerable and connected, those people aren't feeling the need to go and have sex with other people, right? That they're so connected to each other and open to each other that's deeply, deeply fulfilling. And so I had a couple come to one of my retreats years ago, and they were in their early 30s, really hot couple, right? Gorgeous guy, gorgeous woman. And they were fairly connected, but she'd never had a G-spot orgasm before. And that was her. And she wanted to squirt. She was just so keen to squirt. And they shared with me that they would bring other people into their bed, like quite frequently. And then after that week, and like she did learn how to ejaculate, like by the next day, she'd had her first ejaculating orgasm experience. They said to me at breakfast, they were like, I don't think we're going to do this anymore. Like, we feel so connected in a way that we just never have, that we just aren't feeling the need for those experiences any longer with us. And so And I hear that from people all the time, even people who've been together for 20 and 30 years. If they're living in that space together of being truly deeply connected, they're not craving that. And when I've dug deeper with couples, because often there's this, humans were never meant to be this way, and have sex with the same person for the rest of your life. Well, if you're committed to stagnation, you are the same person for the rest of your life. But if you're committed to a life of evolution and growth, you're always a different person. You're always growing and changing and becoming better versions of who you are, both of you. And so, I've been around people, like I've had friends, they were deeply into those communities, and inevitably, like they'd be, like, we're so advanced and liberated because we're doing this. And I'm like, and then I talk to them, and the woman would have had a sexual not, I mean, I haven't spoken to every single couple, right? But people was close enough to be able to ask these questions to, had they been together for 30 years, she'd had sexual abuse stuff that she'd never cleared. They could only get to this like kind of one place, and then they would be stuck in their relationship, and he didn't want to leave her. And so they were like, well, let's open up the relationship, because he felt like he wasn't getting his needs met, and she wasn't showing up to really do the work to get there. And so that becomes almost like a really good substitute, because it like opens, usually couples who are swingers, like they, open conversation is a real big part of that relationship. It has to be, to at least kind of work. And so it might be a level of honesty that they didn't even have before that, right? And even that becomes a bit more nourishing. But ultimately, I see that people get much further and higher and, more powerful relationships generated from conscious monogamy, not, this pseudo whatever monogamy that most people think is monogamy, but this actually deep surrendered place with each other.
What I couldn't agree more with you. I think that's amazing advice, and I really love that. What's some advice that you give to couples to help them achieve that conscious monogamy?
One of the most important things I would say is radical honesty. Like, we live in a very don't ask, don't tell, sins of omission are okay, don't rock the boat, avoid conflict kind of culture. And that transport, except on social media, when you have anonymous handles, then everyone's up for conflict suddenly. But, in real life, people will avoid these things, right? And so it's like committing to both people, committing to, okay, we're going to have regular conversations. Like I call them connecting dates, where you set time aside to have these deeper, pour your heart out, speak your deepest truth. And I call it like clearing the glass. Like, imagine there's a clear pane of glass between two people. And, initially you're really open and you're honest, and the glass is clean and clear. You can see each other, you can feel each other. And then over time, you start to hold things back, right? Oh, I don't want to say that. That might hurt their feelings. Or, oh, they don't really need to know that. Or outright lying to them. And you put all these splotches of mud on the glass, and eventually it builds a wall that you can't see each other, on the other side of. And so it's about removing old stuff off of the glass, and then having a clean as you go policy where you're constantly sharing your deeper truths with each other, especially the important stuff, right? Like the effluvia of your life. Who gives a shit? I went to the store and I bought some pasta, and then this woman in line was really annoying. Like, who cares? Like, don't even bother sharing that, but share the real guts, intimate stuff that you need to say to your partner, and stuff you might be afraid to say to your partner. That's a huge piece of it. Prioritizing sex, making time for sex. And a lot of people will be, maybe they're not really estranged in their relationship, but they've just let things push their relationship to the bottom of their priority list, right? They've got jobs, they've got kids, whatever. And so they're, oh, we're just too tired to have sex. And say, well, sex is where you get energy from. Think of sex as your power source that you go to plug in with each other, you rejuvenate each other, and then you have all this energy and power to go and take on the world. I mean, think of the best sexual encounters you've ever had. How do you feel afterward?
Right. You feel like you're walking down the street like the main character of a movie. Like you're like,
Yeah.
everyone's opening doors for you. Like your
Yeah.
favorite songs blasting in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. A great description. It
Right.
becomes like, not only do you feel good, but other people pick up on it. You're radiating this magnetism and this charisma that people like are attracted to you, right? Like there's something in your aura that they're just like, whoa, what is that? Right. And they don't know what it is, but it's enticing. And so your life takes on this flow and this like ease and momentum because you're wearing that energy all the time if you're having regular sex. So I encourage people to set aside time for a weekly 3-hour sex date. So not dinner, not a movie, not a walk in the park, but 3 hours of being naked and whatever. Maybe when people first hear me say this, like, how could we have sex for 3 hours? And then once they start doing it, they're like, oh my God, we had sex for like 5 hours. We were up till 5 in the morning. We didn't even feel tired the next day. So it's being naked, massaging, oral sex, manual sex, penetration, like all these different practices that I teach, even the breathing practice, right? Like practicing getting better at going longer because you're consciously using your breath. So that, and then, even and then just like psychologically not allowing yourself to make excuses. Like there was a couple who came to one of my retreats and they were on their second marriage. They'd been with people in sexless marriages for 10, 15 years before that. They had children. They had the courage to leave and seek out, a new reality. They find each other and they get married and they committed. They were like, we are going to prioritize our sex life. If they had 6 children between them, had both like really high powered, CEO, upper level management type jobs. And they had sex every single day without fail. Right? So whether that meant getting up at 5 in the morning, staying up late at night, booking a hotel in the middle of the day, like they were committed because they knew they'd been on the other side of like really wasteland kind of relationships and they weren't going to do that again, right? Like whatever they could do to make sure that did not happen again. So when people have children are often one of the most socially validated excuses for not having sex. Oh, you haven't had sex in 2 years. Well, you've got kids. Like that's not natural. Like, no, it's not normal. It's been normalized, right? We think that's normal, but it's not, right? Like, especially when you have children, your sex life is where you plug in. Like, this is your sanctuary. This is your refueling station where you come together and get this energy and take on the challenges of the world. But we get that, right? And we buy into this notion that you've probably heard this idea that your hormones play this kind of trick on you to get you together. Like the first 2 years of a relationship have all these like excitement, dopamine type hormone going, and then after 2 years they just peer off because Mother Nature's gotten you together to have children, and then her job is done, right? Have you heard that idea before? Like after 2 years, everything kind of
No, I
falls to the
haven't, but
wayside.
now I've heard it.
It gets well, it's not worth hearing or believing because it's not true. It's just that people stop prioritizing their relationship at a certain point, right? They
Yeah.
get together, they're committed, they're like, okay, put attention elsewhere. Where the true power is to place your relationship really high up on that totem pole. And then that's what fuels every other part of your life. And then you have that feeling of like walking around on air and like this effortlessness that accompanies you because you've generated that from your bed, from your partner, from your sex life.
Now I'm gonna be so mad at myself if I don't ask you about this. What how do you feel that do you ever deal with like advice about period cramps? Like so I this is obviously like TMI personal, but what is it? Like so I have the Paragard IUD, the copper IUD, because I didn't want to take hormones and I've had it for maybe 4 or 5 years. It's something I've complained about for so long, these period cramps. And
Even before you got the IUD or after or both?
after the IUD, because I think that is one of the side effects, but I don't want to take hormones for birth control. So I read online that like orgasms are supposed to help with period cramps. And I also was just curious if you had any experience giving people advice about cramps or anything like that.
Right. Well, first of all, like if those cramps happen after you had that device in and you didn't have them before, then I would sounds like it's a direct, and that's a side effect of using it, then I would think that it's coming from that. So look, in my work, I'm not a proponent of any kind of artificial birth control, like, definitely not hormonal birth control, but even the IUD and the copper one, for the reason that you're mentioning, is that it creates some kind of interference in the body that's not natural, right? Like, this isn't something that's natural in us. So most people don't realize, because there's been such a, I don't know, I guess, misinformation campaign about it, but natural birth control, like where you observe your body symptoms, and natural birth control, just so you all know, isn't just the tip. It's not calendar method. It's not pull out method. There's a way to observe a woman's body that predicts, that tells you when she's ovulating and when she's not. That's 99% effective. So it's, equivalent to, or equivalent to the pill. And so that's just by, and it might seem daunting because we're not taught about it, or if you do hear about it, you just hear that it's really dangerous, or you hear people doing just the tip and calling it natural birth control. There's a lot of ignorance about that out there. That's what I highly recommend, because I could tell you different things, but if it's coming from this device, like, I don't know that anything is really going to change that unless the device is removed. And, obviously that's your choice. But there's, in general, if somebody didn't have that interference already in place, like, I would say that like, periods are not meant to be painful. Believe it or not, like, periods are not meant to be painful. Menopause is not meant to be difficult. These are meant to be easy, powerful transitions of a woman's life, right? Like, historically speaking, when a woman had her period, she was revered. She was considered at that moment, that time, that her cervix, the door between interdimensional worlds, was opening, and she was like in this position of the shaman at that time. She had access to other states of consciousness and other dimensions of reality. And so she would be encouraged to, like, go inside essentially and receive these visions and come out. But because women these days, so I encourage women as much as possible during their periods to give themselves space, right? Like, to not force themselves to be really active, I'm just going to go to the gym, like, especially on the first day or two of a period, is to, if you can, insulate as much as possible. Take time and nurture yourself. And if you've got a partner, it's like their turn to look after the kids and cook and arrange food, or even order takeout, like whatever it takes to relieve some of that burden off of the woman and allow her to have that really sacred portal kind of experience with herself. And usually by the third day forward, it's not as intense, but I think those first 2 days are quite important, if possible, to preserve and be, like, if you had to, because I work for myself, like, I, have the luxury of, like, okay, I'll just stay home and, go inside. But if there were times when I was traveling and had to get on a plane, like, just try to, like, be as kind of, like, insulated as possible. Or, if you have to go to work, of course, okay, you have to go to work, but then instead of going out for dinner or going shopping after work, like, go straight home, get into your comfy clothes, have a bath, like, have a great cup of tea, like, nurture yourself and allow yourself that really, like, loving internal space to be in. And also look at your period. There's, like, a lot of people talk about this notion of your period as being a message for unresolved stuff in your month, right? So let's say that, over the month, you have a lot of stuff that piles up that you haven't dealt with, like people you need to have certain conversations with, projects that you need to finish, right? Like, what are all the loose ends in your life might show up as a heavier period. It's kind of representing all the things you haven't really examined, versus if you were doing more of this clean as you go type of lifestyle, that you wouldn't have as much accumulated heaviness in your system, right? Both energetically and, like, mentally and even emotionally, that can manifest then as a more difficult period. Plus, using the jade egg and the practices that I teach with that tend to teach a woman to recirculate in the same way that we talk about men recirculating that sexual energy in their system and not dumping it out. Women can lose a lot of energy through their periods. And so you learn how to take that energy, especially with the jade egg, and bring it up, lift it, recirculate it, and use it within the body rather than dumping that energy out, right? So it's like that idea of energetic leakage that we're trying to combat and do the opposite of.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then what do you think is the best advice you ever received?
If you aren't scared shitless, you aren't aiming high enough.
Wow. What's an example where you like use that and think about that?
Okay, let's say that you're dating or meeting potential partners, right? And sometimes, like, we talk about this, like, people might settle for someone, well, they're good. This is good on paper. That's good on paper. They'd make like a favorable partner versus like someone just sets your loins and your heart on fire, right? And you've got like a thumping heart and you're just like, oh my gosh, am I really with this person? Like, pinch me. Is this real? Like someone who exceeds all of your kind of wildest ideas of what that could be like in your work, right? There's like the idea of a 9 to 5 job that you're just kind of paying the bills versus your work that's a real deep extension of who you are as a person, right? Like my work, like the way that I talk when I'm talking to you or doing my work, it's like, that's just me. Like I would be doing this and was doing it before I did it for work. This is like stuff that I've studied and been really passionate about, really excited about. It's a turn on, right? Does it turn you on, right? Does it get your vagina wet? Does it make your vagina tingle? Does it give you a hard on, for something versus like, yeah, like if you have to slather on lube to have sex with it, and this is like a metaphor for anything, is it really turning you on? If your vagina is gushing like no one's business, it's turning you on, right? Like that kind of barometer of things, having this true excitement and like, passion about something versus like, yeah, it'll do.
Awesome. Okay. That is amazing advice. I like that. And I'm glad that I feel that way about my partner. It makes me feel good.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
I always like to pull a tarot card at the end of each podcast to see if it like embodied the energy of the podcast. So this is actually my favorite deck, and I never bring it to the studio because I love it too much. So I get to use it here. It's the Wild Unknown deck,
Wild unknown. Those are two great words.
and her name is Kim also. I feel like I learned so much. I had a whole notepad of questions to ask you. So
You
thank
you did your research. It's good.
you. Sorry, my camera is blurry. I don't know why. But
So you went back and forth a bit and maybe it didn't catch up to you. There it is.
yeah,
You're
there
back.
it is. Okay. Cool. Okay, it's the Son of Cups.
The Son of Cups.
And cups are like emotion, and where's my let's see. And the sun, the like the son, the daughter, and the father, and the Mother of Cups are like characters. Okay, I will read through that. Artistic, introspective. Like all of the Cups family, the son truly excels within the arts. He's usually a musician or a visual artist of some kind, and he finds success within his field. His natural tendency to look inwards adds to his charm and mystique. To others, he may seem secretive, and even peaceful, while deep inside, he carries a dark kernel of intensity. I don't know why I pulled that card. I don't know.
I mean, the artistic expression I like.
Yeah, and also kind of maybe having like a dark kernel of intensity on the inside. I like that.
Yeah.
Kim, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you?
KimAnami.com is my website, and I've got lots of different online programs there. I have a podcast called Orgasmic Enlightenment and a YouTube channel, and my Instagram at Kim Anami.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. This was great.